All right, ready to dive into some ancient Egypt.
Let's do it. Always up for a journey back in time.
This time we're looking at a collection of excerpts, all about ancient Egyptian artifacts from the late 1800s.
That era of early archaeology, so much to unpack there. It's like we're time travelers ourselves, getting to see these discoveries through their eyes.
Exactly, and one thing that jumps out right away is how much we need to rethink this whole Egyptians worshipped animals idea.
Yeah, the text really pushes back on that, doesn't it? It's not about literal animal worship. It's all about symbolism.
Like with Apis, the bull. I mean, come on, they weren't just bowing down to any random bull.
Right. The text points out that Apis was probably linked to renewal, the whole cycle of the Nile floods. Powerful imagery.
So it's more like they saw the bull as representing a bigger idea.
Exactly. Like we use a lion for strength, an eagle for freedom, same kind of thing.
Makes you wonder, how many cultures have we totally misread because we didn't get the symbols?
It's a great point. This deep dive isn't just about ancient Egypt. It's about how we understand history itself.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to their gods. This text zeroes in on one in particular.
Ah, yes, Amun-Ra, the supreme god. And what's fascinating is the emphasis on them believing in one ultimate god.
That's a bit of a mind blower, right? You don't always expect that from ancient religions.
They describe Amun-Ra as eternal, the creator of everything, a being of, well, infinite perfection, it says.
You know, sometimes our modern ideas get in the way of really seeing what these cultures believed.
For sure. And speaking of modern ideas, there are some curious parallels here with other religions. Later religions, even.
You're talking about the triads, right? Those groupings of three deities. Hard not to think of the Trinity there.
The text even suggests that early Christians might have, well, borrowed some ideas from the Egyptians. Now, that's a theory.
Controversial, for sure, but fascinating to consider. And it wasn't just theology either.
Right. It talks about how these triads also influenced their government, their whole structure of power.
So the idea of a supreme being and others emanating from that, it wasn't just a belief, it shaped their society.
Which happens all the time in history, right? Religious ideas become the foundation for everything else.
Makes you wonder how much of that is still with us today, in ways we don't even realize. But let's keep digging into this text, because it's got another intriguing piece of the puzzle.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Seth, the god with the donkey head. You got to wonder what's going on there.
Right. Like, there's got to be a deeper meaning behind that choice. It can't be random.
The text explains Seth as a symbol of a usurper, someone who takes power illegitimately.
Okay, so not just a donkey. There's a story here.
And most scholars think he represents the Hyksos, those foreigners who ruled part of Egypt for a while. Imagine seeing that image during their reign. Pretty powerful statement.
Like a visual protest. You can almost feel the resistance in that image.
The text actually suggests Seth's image might have been a rallying point for the Egyptians. It's amazing how much a symbol can convey.
You really can't just look at these things on the surface, can you? Context is everything.
And speaking of context, this text also starts to hint at just how sophisticated Egyptian civilization was.
Right, it goes beyond the pyramids and King Tut, right? I mean,
Right.
the mummifications, those elaborate tombs they built, the hieroglyphs.
It points to a level of knowledge and skill that's way beyond what people usually picture when they think ancient, you know?
Like with mummification, the text emphasizes it wasn't just about preserving the body. It was all tied up in their beliefs about the soul, what happened after death.
It really makes you think about the depth of their understanding of anatomy, of chemistry, to pull that off.
And the dedication involved.
Yeah.
I mean, the text describes a long, complex process, all because they believed it was that important to prepare for the afterlife.
It definitely makes you see ancient Egypt in a new light, so much more than the simple stories we're often told.
It was a complex society, intellectually vibrant, that's for sure. And we've only just scratched the surface here.
We've got a lot more ground to cover in this deep dive, so let's keep going. Welcome back.
We're digging deeper into ancient Egypt, and it's clear that their understanding of the afterlife was a whole other level.
Yeah, not just a simple heaven or hell kind of deal. Their beliefs were so detailed, so intricate.
Okay, so let's talk about those tombs, those hypogea.
Yeah.
They weren't just for burying the dead, right?
Yeah.
The text connects them directly to their beliefs about the journey after death.
Exactly. They were almost like guidebooks for the afterlife, filled with images, inscriptions, all there to help the deceased navigate the underworld.
There's that image that comes to mind, the weighing of the heart, right?
Yeah.
Against a feather, I think.
Right, the judgment scene. And that concept isn't unique to the Egyptians.
Oh, yeah, totally. It pops up in other religions, too.
The text actually draws a comparison to the Christian idea of Judgment Day, even suggests there could be a connection there, an exchange of ideas across cultures.
Wow, so this idea of a soul being judged, it's been around for a while.
And it wasn't a simple good or bad judgment either. The text lays out all these stages of the afterlife journey, the challenges the soul faced, the rewards for a virtuous life.
It makes you realize how much thought they put into it, you know? They weren't just making this stuff up as they went along.
No way. They envisioned a realm of eternal happiness for those who lived righteously. And their rituals, everything was about helping people get there to navigate the dangers of the underworld.
Okay, so they had the afterlife mapped out.
Yeah.
But what about all those gods? Besides Mon-Ra, I mean.
Right.
How do they all fit into this complex system?
Well, that's where their use of symbols really comes into play. Each deity represented a specific part of nature, or maybe human experience, even abstract concepts.
So like gods for the Nile, for the harvest, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you got it. Gods for everything. The sun, the moon, wisdom, justice, even magic.
Okay, now magic, that's something I got to hear more about. The text mentions this concept of Heka.
Yeah, Heka is often translated as magic, but it's not exactly about pulling rabbits out of hats. It's more about harnessing spiritual forces to influence the world.
So more mystical than magical, maybe?
In a way, yeah. And Heka was everywhere in Egyptian society. Medicine, rituals, even just everyday life.
It almost makes me think of prayer,
Yeah.
seeking guidance from a higher power, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see the parallels. But Heka was also seen as something you could learn, something you could master, not just passively receive.
It really shows how connected they were to the spiritual world, always seeking ways to interact with it.
And one of the most powerful examples of that connection is the story of Osiris.
Osiris, refresh my memory.
Oh, right. He's a god who was murdered and then resurrected, and his story is full of symbolism, plays a huge role in their beliefs about death and rebirth.
Murdered and resurrected. That sounds familiar somehow.
Yeah, there are definitely echoes of that in other religions, but what's really interesting is how they linked Osiris to the flooding of the Nile. His death and resurrection became a metaphor for the land itself, dying and then coming back to life each year.
So a god connected to the very source of life for Egypt.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a myth either. They would actually act out his story in these elaborate rituals and festivals. Imagine witnessing those ceremonies, seeing that story come to life.
It's amazing how their beliefs were so intertwined with their environment, with their everyday experiences.
And we've only just scratched the surface. We haven't even talked about the priests, the temples, the way Egyptian religion shaped their daily lives.
Well, let's not waste any time then. There's still so much more to uncover. We've been on this amazing journey through ancient Egyptian religion, and one thing's for sure, their beliefs were woven into every part of their lives.
And to really understand how deeply, we need to look at the role of the priests.
Right. The source material really emphasizes how important they were, not just religious figures, but powerful figures in every aspect of society.
Exactly. They were the ones maintaining the temples, performing the rituals, advising the pharaoh.
And the text also mentions they were keepers of knowledge, interpreters of dreams, even healers.
It's like they were the backbone of Egyptian society.
In a lot of ways, yeah, holding everything together.
Maintaining that balance, between the human world and the divine.
Okay, but how did you actually become a priest? Was it just a family thing, or did you have to prove yourself somehow?
Well, there were definitely hereditary aspects to it. Some families held priestly positions for generations.
So, like being born into the right family gave you a head start.
Yeah, but the text also talks about rigorous training, years of education.
So it wasn't just a free pass, you had to earn it.
Oh, absolutely. They studied religious texts, learned the rituals, mastered the hieroglyphs.
Wow, that's a serious commitment.
And when you think about their role in society, it makes sense, right? They were communicating with the gods, making sure the rituals were done right, guiding the pharaoh.
It's like they were the bridge between the earthly and the divine.
Exactly. And that connection becomes even more clear when you think about the temples themselves.
I mean, those incredible structures, the massive columns, the towering statues, they had to be more than just places of worship.
The temples were considered the actual homes of the gods.
Wow, so you weren't just going to pray. You were visiting the gods in their own house.
Precisely. And the architecture was all designed to create this sense of awe and wonder, to connect you to the divine.
The text describes these grand halls, the intricate carvings. It sounds like a completely immersive experience.
It was meant to transport you, you know, to another realm.
And they even align the temples with astronomical events, like the solstices and equinoxes.
Their understanding of astronomy was really advanced, and they wove it into everything, their religious practices, everything.
This whole deep dive has really changed how I see ancient Egypt.
Me too. It's so much more than just pyramids and tombs, right?
We've gone from debunking the myth of animal worship to exploring their understanding of the afterlife, the role of the priests, the power of their temples.
And through it all, we see this civilization that valued knowledge, that was deeply spiritual, deeply connected to the world around them.
Their beliefs were far from primitive. They were complex, sophisticated, and they might have even shaped the course of history. Who knows?
It makes you wonder what other mysteries are out there just waiting to be uncovered.
Absolutely. And while this deep dive comes to an end, the exploration never really does. So keep those questions coming and join us next time as we continue to delve into the past.